Kia keeper, or hi gang. I am just trimming off some of the low branches from some dogwood prunings that I made at the end of last year, really, back in winter. And they're all dry now. And normally I would throw them on the compost heap and they would just make lovely brown matter in my compost heap. But these ones I have dried and saved, and it's for this purpose right here. So I have here a little clump of my dwarf peas, and they're lovely and they've started shooting up, and I'm very pleased with them. But even though they are a short variety, they're still going to want something to climb up. So these little prunings will make wonderful supports, and the little tendrils will start to climb all the way up through here.
Bok, I'm Mandy O. This is Grow, Make, Cook, and welcome to my garden. I grew up in Australia in a permaculture family, but after we got married, Mr. O and I moved here to his home country of Croatia. I am a passionate and hands-on homemaker and gardener, and I love life's simple pleasures. So join me on my journey, and together we can learn to grow, make, and cook. This is the second week in April, or travanj.
That's a really easy job done. Now, this week is really feeling like the beginning of spring. We've had lots of really cold weather over the weekend, last weekend, and the beginning of this week. And it was snowing, and there was ice in a lot of the flowers, and so I'm a little bit worried about our potential plum harvest this year, what with all the ice and freezing. But things really are starting to come back. Even my lemon balm is springing into action. There are so many things to be thankful for right now. I adore this feeling of watching all the little baby flowers come up. And this one, Zumbul in Croatian, is a real treat. These grape hyacinths, or muscari, they're just a spectacular little flower, and I think they're a really underrated plant. You don't see them very often in gardens here, and I know they can be a little bit obnoxious. They can spread and they can grow to quite thick clumps, but I just think they're so adorable. Why wouldn't you want more of these? So just here by my little flowers, a little bit further towards this lovely elder, which is just starting to make its first buds. I can't wait for those to come. But just underneath here, where I get a bit more shade, I am planting one of the real stars of early spring, and these are primroses. I adore them. I think they're just a spectacular little plant, and they'll take a bit of shade, which they will get under here. So out there where it's a little bit further into the sun, I've got, more hardy things and things that want a little bit more sunshine, but I want to just work back towards the tree so that I can get some happy spring flowers a little bit closer and a little bit lower down. So I've got some more things closer to the places that you walk on the stepping stones here in the garden. So these guys are pretty tough, they're pretty tolerant, and really, they're really a cinch to put in. So they like loose, rich soil, and here it's not too bad. I have improved this last year. I dug compost into it, so it's not as dry and it's not quite as difficult to work as a lot of the rest of my soil, so I'm not going to worry too much about improving it. But primroses won't argue if you want to put a little bit of goodness in around them. But I don't think you really need to unless your soil's very poor. And I'll give that a really good soak, and it should be fine. I don't really need to harden them off. They're pretty tough. He'll just grow like that. Now, these guys should thrive in this climate here. It gets cold enough for them to go dormant and then warm enough for them to spring up into life. And I would expect in this part of the world that these guys will live for many years to come, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to divide them up and plant them out again. Another thing that is springing up this week, and I look forward to every year, are these. These are the florets of my Tuscan kale, and these are the primary reason I keep my Tuscan kale in the ground all winter, taking up space, doing its thing, is so we get these sweet, delicious florets. It's like broccoli but sweeter, and it's full of goodness, so vitamins and nutrients galore, and a delicious supper. I think that's probably what I have here. Are my dahlia cuttings. We spoke about them last year, but I don't think I actually showed you these ones, and they're looking really very sorry. There is 2 little carnation cuttings in the middle of that I just poked in there because they were left over, and they both seem to have grown on quite well, but this now is looking really very scraggly and sorry and horrible, really. I should have taken care of this months ago, but to be perfectly honest with you all, I forgot about it, and now these poor dahlias and carnations are really struggling and they're looking really horrible. So the time to deal with this is right now. I love my terracotta pots, so I've just popped some sifted garden compost in them, and I'm going to just break this up and see if I can't replant these beauties into somewhere that will make them a little bit happier. Now, dahlias really should have been repotted a long time ago in order to be happy. They start to make, oh, you can even see the beginning of a little tuber there. So there's the little tuber that comes from under the ground, and this is what holds all the energy and allows you to grow your tubers on and then your dahlias year after year. So this is what we want to protect, and that little plant is looking positively miserable. So I think it's time we give him a forever home, well, at least a home for the next sort of 6 months or so, in a little small pot. I'll just take some of that, more of that compost, and fill around him very gently. These will go directly out into my cold frames that I was talking about last week to start hardening them off, because I want to get these guys out as soon as all the risk of frost has passed. And so we're starting to get warmer nights. They're starting to sit around the 3 degrees mark pretty regularly. So the chances that the frosts will come back are starting to diminish, and it gives me hope for a lot of these things that I hope to get out and into the garden soon. Now, what I have here is something that is a completely new one on me. This is the seed for a Chinese lantern fruit, and it's got this lovely papery thin surrounds, and it's got the most delightful little hanging protection, I guess, or case for these little orange fruits, and I think it's really exciting. Now, they should grow here. They are pretty tough. They are a perennial, but a herbaceous perennial, so they'll die back every year, all the way back to the ground. The whole of the top dies off, and then they'll spring back each spring. So this little handful of seeds that I've been given from a friend, which were seed saved, these are not bought, these were, as you can tell by the fruit still attached, these were picked fresh from a garden. But this is really exciting, and I can't wait to give this a go. So these guys you want to sow when all the frost has passed. So what I'm going to do is sow them just on the surface here. I've just got some compost, and I'm just going to surface sow them as thinly as I can, and the light will help them germinate. And then what I'm going to do is just gently sort of pat them in so that they're in nice contact with the soil, and then I'm going to water them in as well. And I think maybe just a couple more. I can see that there's some gaps there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop these under protection to germinate. So I'm going to put these into those same cold frames so that they don't get any frost hitting them at all. I don't want these to freeze. What I want is for them to be a bit tough, to live outside happily, and hopefully produce us some lantern fruits. Now when I water these, I'm using a can with a rose head attachment, and that is so that I don't get too much of that happening, which is big blobbing drops of water. What I want is a gentle sprinkle so I don't push the seeds down too far. They will settle a bit, but I want them to stay on the surface so that the sunlight helps them germinate. And in they go. Down here I sowed a whole bunch of lettuces, quite tightly really, and the idea of these is that it's more like a nursery bed. So what I can do is I can treat this whole bit of garden rather like a seed tray. So a lot of things have germinated and they've started growing quite well, but they're really close together. So what I can do is just grab a trowel, lift a section like this, and then separate them and plant them out. I've got a lot of spots in my great big garden bed that I want to put lettuces. I love the colour of these. They're lime, almost acid green, and they make lovely big heads and they look gorgeous, and I think they're lovely as a foliage plant in the garden. But even better than that is that you then get to put them on your plate. So I'm digging up clumps and I'm planting them with a little handful of compost into my garden. So let's go. Down here in this new part of the garden where I don't have a lot of structure and I don't have a lot of shape yet, and I do have a bit of shade from the elder, is where I'm going to plant at least a clump and perhaps even a bit of a drift of lettuces. I've got lots of bare ground because this is all newly dug up garden bed. So what I want to do is fill in the gaps essentially. Now these lettuces will do fine in here. Lettuces will grow in part shade, but they will grow a bit slower than those that are in full sun. So I'm just teasing them out one at a time, trying to keep as much root on them as possible. And when I'm handling the tops, I'm holding it by a leaf, so I'm not crushing that main stem. And then a little handful of compost in the hole that I've dug for this one, and I'll just pop him in and fill back around. And then I'm going to water him in, so that means that I'll settle the soil down by watering him rather than pushing too hard. I don't want to compact that too much at the beginning. And I'm aiming to make this a bit like a drift or a garden looking thing, rather than doing them in rows or in blocks like you would in a vegetable garden. I want this to look decorative. You can do a lot with vegetables and fruits, and it doesn't have to look like you're growing crops in a field. With that though, I think that's probably about all we've got time for today. So if you like what we're doing, please like the video. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. And if you want notifications, use the bell icon below. Until next time then, do widzenia.